For about 70 of its 112 years, this, by far the largest lunatic asylum ever built, dominated the horizon when looking west from Columbus, Ohio. Based on square footage, this multi-basement structure had at least 7 levels, making it arguably the largest enclosed building on Earth, when it opened in 1877. It was America's largest building until the Pentagon was built 65 years later. Because it was built from brick, stone and mortar, decades before steel framing cut the cost of building massive structures to pennies on the dollar, few buildings on Earth even approached this scale. However, to exaggerate its size, it was situated above a 110-foot ridge, overlooking Ohio's flatland capital. In the 1800s, just seeing such an enormous structure hovering over any city would have terrified most citizens and visitors. But this was not scary enough. To maximize its frightening effect, our government built this crazy castle to be the architectural version of a vampire bat. Its 14 towers were based on their ears. Its gables were inspired by their snapping jaws. Its windows depicted their eyes. From above, it had the silhouette of Count Dracula, spreading his wings. But why would Ohio's government want one of the most frightening structures ever built, overlooking their state's capital? According to the founder of UpperColumbus.org, fitness device inventor and creator of the Columbus Yesteryear series, Craig Wise, Ohio did not need or want it. But Ohio-born President Ulysses S. Grant did. Wise has spent over 30 years casually linking facts, events, and crimes, with a few wild legends of the hilltop's early history. Here's the puzzle he has pieced together. In the fall of 1869, Ohio's government started rebuilding Columbus's first lunatic asylum, which had burned to the ground 1 year earlier. It was located on the city's east side where East Broad Street now crosses Interstate 71. This attractive asylum, designed to look like a giant version of the White House, could house around 350 lunatics, not 7,500. About a month after reconstruction began, it was suddenly terminated, and plans for this massive vampire-inspired structure, nearly 10 times larger, were just as unexpectedly approved. This enormous building nearly doubled the cost of the most expensive project in Ohio's previous history, which was almost 600 miles of canals linking Lake Erie to the Ohio River. Wise believes he can now prove that the federal government secretly reimbursed Ohio for building this horrifying structure above that ridge. Why would Washington want such a frightening building casting its shadow over Ohio's capital? Wise claims they needed to scare everyone away from the top-secret projects they would soon be operating in, under, and behind this monstrosity. They expensively maximize the fact that most people were terrified by bats and lunatic asylums. This report exposes America's first version of Area 51, and the Secret Service's first actually secret division, hiding behind it. But the wild and crazy things they were also doing inside this, the greatest of all horror houses, deserves and is getting its own YouTube program in this series. Please click subscribe so you don't miss it. Several years before the Civil War became inevitable, inventor Alfred Noble had begun marketing his dynamite to mining companies, which created a massive new problem for the Union forces. In the hands of Confederate infiltrators, this revolutionary explosive could turn the North's munitions factories into sitting ducks. So these facilities had to be rapidly replaced. Simultaneously, Union General William Sherman, who was also from Central Ohio, determined that one train could provide as much food, weaponry, and manpower as 17,000 military supply wagons. So, the Union Army then integrated their new facilities into these railroads, as secretly as possible. 1 decade earlier, tiny Columbus suddenly became the center of the nation's massive new web of railroads. From this sparsely populated state capital, with only 16,000 citizens, federal government trains could reach most of the nation's largest cities in 12 hours or less. By the time the war began, railroad cargo warehousing had temporarily turned Columbus into the nation's fastest-growing city. By rail, Columbus was also just 2 hours above the Confederacy, yet too far north for the much smaller Southern armies to attack, without abandoning the lands they were trying to defend. The Ohio State Penitentiary, one of America's largest prisons, holding thousands of convicts serving hard labor, was also located in Columbus, so a massive workforce was also in place locally. Combined with the first cross-country communications technology, the telegraph, highly secluded land near Columbus suddenly became ideal for secretly developing, building, storing, and shipping military technologies. Franklinton, the first settlement in central Ohio, with a population of just 200, was directly across the Scioto River from Columbus. However, after heavy rains, Franklinton typically flooded, so Columbus's developers stayed east of the river, keeping the farms and forests west of the city highly secluded. On the western side of Franklinton, 2 miles west of Columbus, the land abruptly rose 100 feet, up what was then called Sullivan's Hill. About a month after the war began, those convicts began building Camp Chase, a maximum security Union Army base, on top of the hill, 4 to 7 miles west of Columbus, over a secluded railroad. At first, closest to the city, they erected a 12-foot stockade wall around about 135 acres, creating the second largest prisoner camp of the war. Basic training and camp security also operated from inside these walls, but holding thousands of Confederate soldiers was also the ideal cover for an abundance of security. There are no surviving maps of Sullivan's Hill, at least available to the public, showing Camp Chase's exact location. However, several bird's-eye sketches of just Camp Chase, all selling the story that the entire camp was inside these walls, which are otherwise quite different, do still exist. The last remnants of that wall were removed about 75 years later, so we know that its eastern section ran along what is now South Hague Avenue, and its western side became Westgate Avenue. However, this wall was nearly a half-mile east of that railroad. Wise says he has found dozens of items and events proving that Camp Chase spread out over thousands of acres, centered right over those rails. For example, 3 maps from between 1884 and 1909 have the name Camp Chase printed on them, and all 3 also display it on the other side of the tracks. However, using this workforce to build a wall around several square miles would have taken years, when producing and hiding munitions was immensely more important work. After the convicts finished that stockade wall around the prison camp, some of them were moved about 3/4 of a mile farther west, 1,000 feet past those tracks, and 1,000 feet south of the National Road, to start on their next project, digging this F-shaped trench, 50 feet wide, 30 feet deep, for over 1,100 total feet. Then, using iron produced for railroad bridges, and concrete, the convicts built walls and then a roof about 12 feet above the trench's floor. Some of the earth removed from the ditch was used to cover the iron roof, creating what would become a secret underground munitions factory, 15 to 30 feet below the surface. On the ground above the facility, the convicts erected a 250 by 150-foot barn-like building, and a 1,000-foot track connecting it to the railroad. For an insignificant-seeming cover, this building was used as the maintenance garage to grease and service federal government trains. Its secret use was to hide boxcars while they were being loaded with the munitions that convicts had begun producing 30 feet below. If you are wondering how they could see to build these explosives underground, a decade before light bulbs, they used a labor-intensive method called limelight. Limelight is molten calcium that brightly glows. Its first recorded use was lighting up opera houses along Broadway 30 years before the Civil War. On April 15, 1865, 5 days after the Confederacy surrendered, Republican President Lincoln was assassinated, and his vice president, a Southern Democrat named Andrew Johnson, replaced him. Several weeks later, to the dismay of the country's next 3 presidents, all 3 Ohio-born Union Army generals, Johnson ordered the closure of most Civil War bases, including Camp Chase. So, this still secret underground compound, and the locomotive maintenance building above, were mostly abandoned. An evidence-supported legend claims that during Johnson's 3 years as president, a dozen or so luxury homes were built on Sullivan's Hill's eastern ridge, overlooking Columbus. So, this spectacular view of Ohio's State House from this Franklin County hill, had started ending this hill's seclusion. In 1869, less than 4 years after the war, General Grant replaced Johnson as president. He quietly reopened this still secret underground facility, so the Army could resume the development of military technologies, secretly. At this same time, eminent domain was used to force those wealthy homeowners into selling their mansions overlooking Columbus, for 2 enormous government projects. To keep them happy and quiet, they were supposedly paid massive profits. Those mansions were immediately demolished. Several months later, in early 1870, Columbus's new mayor, a wealthy land baron named George Meeker, suddenly annexed Franklinton, and every inch of Sullivan's Hill that overlooked the city. He also renamed Sullivan's Hill to one of the most generic-sounding names anyone could imagine, the Hilltop. While this was going on, Meeker also fired the entire Columbus Police Department. Then opened a new one with his childhood buddies in charge. Literally, days later, former Union General Rutherford B. Hayes, who was now Ohio's governor, held the groundbreaking ceremony for that vampire bat-inspired spook house. Although its vampire wing spread over 13 acres, this lunatic asylum was given nearly 400 acres of lawn, taking up every inch of dry land north of the National Trail, that overlooked Columbus. About a week later, taking up the remaining 300 acres overlooking the city, the ground broke for another frightening structure: the Columbus Imbecile Asylum. Even at 1/6 the size of its crazy neighbor, it still appears to be the largest imbecile asylum ever built. Together these two structures created a terrifying gate across the city's western horizon, scaring almost everyone away. However, to make sure that all of Columbus's future upscale projects would remain east of the river, the only land Meeker left available for private development on his city's new west side was that swampy Franklinton floodplain. On Saturday, February 1, 1879, at 1 o'clock in the morning, less than 2 years after the lunatic asylum opened, arsonists snuck into the Franklin County Courthouse's vault. There they soaked the official records of Sullivan's Hill in coal oil, then incinerated them. As they left, they made sure to relock the iron vault in the courthouse building, apparently using their keys. That afternoon, the Columbus Dispatch published an article titled "Burning the Records." This fire is how the actual boundaries of Camp Chase, the maps of Sullivan's Hill, and the land records of those mansion homes overlooking Columbus, were erased from history. Wise says that virtually everything published about West Columbus's early history tells a totally different story, depending on the source. For starters, if you search Franklinton at Wikipedia, they say Franklinton was annexed in 1859. Then search Columbus, and they claim 1837. Then ask Google, and they will tell you 1871. Yet all are unexplainably incorrect. Columbus records and the Franklinton Historical Society both confirm that Mayor Meeker annexed all of Franklinton in 1870. Right after that courthouse fire in 1879, America's next president, Rutherford B. Hayes, the same man who broke ground for the massive lunatic asylum as Ohio's governor, had Thomas Edison, who was also from Ohio, secretly electrify the underground compound. President Hayes then had his Secret Service convert part of it into the control center for the nation's first full-time undercover intelligence agency, codenamed Orphan. If asked, the official excuse for the little government trains zipping federal spies in and out of that locomotive maintenance building was a federal program rushing medical aid to the millions of orphan children European nations started dumping into America's open arms right after the Civil War. Around the time the United States entered the First World War, another much deeper underground facility was installed about 3/4 of a mile north of Orphan's headquarters. Together these hidden facilities kept the country's first version of Area 51, operating through the 1920s. Around 1925, aircraft had begun giving Washington's secret keepers rapid access to the most remote sites in the country's desert wastelands. Orphan's speedy little trains could not compete against airplanes flying the U.S. Airmail logo. This caused the Secret Service to convert Orphan into a new covert program codenamed Postal. So in 1927, the first Port Columbus Airport opened directly across the street from Orphan's headquarters. Conveniently, it was built to be the post office's Midwestern airmail hub. It also was the home of a trick flying school, which offered the most advanced stunt flying lessons in the nation. 1 year later, in 1928, a new Port Columbus Airport opened on the city's east side. Now called the Sullivan Avenue Airport, it continued being the home of that trick flying school, and the post office's Midwestern airmail hub, for another decade. As the secret development programs were being moved to the western deserts, Washington converted Orphan's old underground facility into a hidden junkyard of the nation's obsolete secrets. Wise only has second- and third-hand reports that during the Second World War, Westinghouse was secretly building Sherman tank parts, bomb sights, and the nation's first radar units inside the newer underground facility. In 1944, President Roosevelt ordered Orphan's underground junkyard sealed, and its entrances buried. He also ordered the secret airborne research that was being performed in several Sullivan Avenue Airport hangars, moved about 45 miles further west, to the massive Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He then made General Motors and Westinghouse offers they could not refuse, to have them build massive new factories above both underground facilities, to close and forget them forever, unless needed again. Wise has far less physical evidence about the larger facility under the former Westinghouse factory. However, since that building is now a warehouse for Big Lots Corporation, that secret underground compound is likely still there. To make room for the Holly Hills subdivision, the country's first version of Area 51 was plowed over in 1958. In late 2009, the dilapidated General Motors factory, above the old Orphan base, was torn down to make room for Ohio's largest casino. The workers that demolished the factory also filled its nearly 3 acres of basement space with rubble from its concrete floor mixed with soil brought in from other construction sites. This high-resolution image from Google Earth, taken after that demolition in May of 2010, while the last piles of factory debris were still being removed, verify that those basement rooms had already been filled. However, Google's next image, from 6 months later, taken during a site cleanup phase when only a handful of people were working on the site, is the only known photograph showing the complete outline of the old Orphan spy base, and the foundation of the locomotive service building above it. This image was taken right after its iron walls, roof, and antiquated secrets had to have been quietly removed before the people about to build the new casino would have stumbled over them. This image of Orphan's outline also verifies that an enormous mound of soil, over an acre in diameter, had been sitting right beside the underground structure. The image from 6 months earlier also verifies that this huge mound did not exist until after the factory demolition completely concluded. This missing mound explains where the 15 feet of earth that was above Orphan's iron roof was placed while America's first secret spy complex was being removed. Bulldozer tracks appear to show that the earth had been shoved back into the remaining trench after its contents and roof had been exhumed. No trace of Orphan's underground structure remained visible during the groundbreaking ceremony for the casino 4 months later. Why is the story of America's first secret spy headquarters, and its first version of Area 51, so crucial to share? After the federal, state, and city governments spent a century scaring upscale developers away from Columbus's Hilltop, the frightening reputation they created continues. Today the Hilltop and Franklinton maintain some of the highest poverty and crime rates of American cities, while the rest of Central Ohio's economy has been booming for 2 decades. The only reason a Hollywood casino came to this hill, local politicians did not want a casino east of the river, where they all live. Being officially ignored for over 150 years has kept this amazing history-packed hill nationally unknown, creating a value-packed opportunity in one of America's most convenient and fascinating locations. This hill is once again overlooking the fastest-growing city in the Midwest, with one of the nation's hottest real estate markets. Combined with likely America's most thrilling untold history, this massively undervalued side of Columbus has incredible potential for upscale and entertainment-based growth. However, merely telling this story will only have about as much economic impact as publishing another history book. So, the primary goal of the Upper Columbus Project is to fictionalize the amazing history of Sullivan's Hill into fun action-packed entertainment, loaded with wild spy gadgets, speed machines, superhero agents, sexy ladies, and of course ruthless villains, bent on world domination. In 2016, Wise began writing 5 action novels, a monthly web-based comic book concept, TV, and movie scripts, all based inside Orphan's underground complex. These dramatized shows feature Agent Colin McLaughlin, a former Columbus cop, boxer, and child spy for the Union Army. After being fired by Mayor Meeker in 1870, McLaughlin becomes the popular leader of a local bar band called the Irish Orphans, which later becomes his cover. His spy partner, the 6'9" former child slave son of Aunt Jemima, Agent Lamont Freeman, plays the band's manager, as he and Colin chase ruthless industrial tyrants and their monstrous henchmen through actual history. In March of 1881, President James Garfield, the third Ohio-born president in a row, secretly appoints former President Hayes as Orphan's commander. They hire Nikola Tesla to be something like Q from James Bond movies. Tesla almost instantly invents whatever wild, yet scientifically plausible gadget that the Orphan agents need. Tesla also works with George Westinghouse to build a small fleet of little, ultra-fast, hidden weapon-packed trains, disguised as Orphan ambulances. These machines they call Orphs, race Orphan agents around the nation under the guise of rushing medical aid to those poor orphan babies. If exposed correctly, this hill's incredible secret past, embellished into exciting action-packed entertainment, will eventually convert this ignored hill into one of the Midwest's most exciting places to live, work, visit and open interesting upscale ventures. We cannot do this alone. Wise is not a great writer. He has just uncovered a treasure trove of fantastic entertainment potential, triggered by this hill's amazing secret history. The Upper Columbus Project needs artistic, literary, organizational, legal, media and fundraising people that want to see this happen. Wise also needs to hear and see everything you know or have about this hill's top secret past.